easy to destabilize the sacroiliac joint when we're doing that. It's kind of like it can pry open the SI joint a little bit. So when we're working with hips, make sure you want to be in your range of motion and touch to your edges, but not jump over the cliff, right? So you want to stay within a comfortable range for your body. And one of the things that I think is really great about opening the hips in this way, rotational work in the hips, is that all of us sit, and whether you sit on the ground, cross-legged, or even if you're sitting in a chair, it's rare that we all sit firmly in a chair with our feet flat on the ground, which, by the way, is the best way to be sitting in a chair. But oftentimes we tuck one foot under, we kind of lean over onto one side. We've got, all sorts of weird ways that we can sit. And having a lot of range of motion in our hip joints can really help with how we are able to move throughout the day. Not to mention, if we trip and fall, it's just one of those things that is a part of our balance equation, that if we have capacity to move our pelvis and move our hip joints and our spine, we have adaptability in all sorts of movement capacities. So let's go ahead and get to it. All right, so close your eyes and first notice how you are sitting. Are you up on the edge of something? Like I'm sitting on a bolster, and I have height underneath me, because if I sit flat on the ground, it makes me roll my spine and I tend to round. So the higher you can get up under your pelvis, the easier it is to keep the neutral axial extension through your spine. So check in with how you are. Are your knees in line with your hips or a little bit lower? And if they're way higher than your hips, then consider putting more underneath you to sit cross-legged. And then notice, how are your knees? Is it difficult for you to sit cross-legged from a perspective of your spine, your hip joints, or your knee joints? So just check in, and always, if a knee bothers you in rotational work, you can put a block or something underneath your knees. So once you have that comfort, sit up straight and tall. Feel the neutral spine and come into this state of ease. Let the eyes close, let the face relax. Have your engines, did you hit the ground running today? Is there a lot in your mind? Can you start to quiet and listen to the breath? Notice the expansiveness of your ribs. As you breathe in and you breathe out, are you able to have mobility in your diaphragm and in your rib cage? And pay attention, as your neutral spine is here, where are you on your sit bones? Do you feel yourself grounded through your pelvis well? Are you broad? Do you feel a broad base of support? And then notice in particular your hip flexors, the ones that pull your knees up toward your chest. Are they engaged? Do you feel like you have to kind of hold yourself with your hip flexors when you're sitting cross-legged? Or can you let your knees dissolve toward the earth? Is there a halfway point where you can have a little integration of muscular awareness, but not tension, where you're gripping and tightening? All right, and let's start here with some seated cat-cow. So round the spine a little bit, hands on your knees, roll back just a little bit, feel the flexion of your spine, tuck your chin, and then roll forward to the front of your sit bones and feel the spine arch a little bit, lift your chin up, touch your teeth, and then just back and forth. How's your breath moving with this? My natural tendency is to exhale when I round my back and inhale when I arch my back. But where is your tendency? Can you follow what's happening? Be aware of how your breath and your movement relate to each other. All right, and then come back to the neutral spine. Can you feel what neutral feels like? Place your palms together at your heart and bow in. Create an intention for the mind, the heart, the body, whatever the spirit needs. Create an intention for your practice. All right, let's go ahead and release the hands down and come onto your back. Okay. So as you find yourself coming onto the floor, see what it feels like to have spaciousness. When we lie down, it's such a gift to our joints to have this sense of openness. So notice your hips, notice your knees, notice your pelvis, your spine, your shoulders, your elbows, your neck, your skull, all the places. Okay, just let your body rest down for a moment. Give the imprint of ease into your mind and into your body so that you echo this through your practice, even when you're working, with strength and breathing and all these things. Can you feel the ease that you're cultivating here travel with you? All right, stretch your arms overhead and feel the length. Reach the right side, reach the left side, opening up the rib cage, finding the length. Deep breath in, deep breath away. And then go ahead and bring the knees into the chest and rock a little bit, swaying from side to side. First things first with the hips, are you able to flex your hip joints? Are you able to bring your knees toward your chest, or do you have pain in your hip joints? So bring your knees a little further away and see what you can do to drop the femur bones in their sockets and draw the knees in again. Sway from side to side. Keep the right knee in, stretch the left leg long, and roll around. So ankles rolling, wiggling toes, waking up the feet, feeling the shin bones, feeling the muscles along your shins, your calves. And then feel a good squeeze with the other leg, left knee in, and also feel the extension in the right hip. So just as we learn to flex our hip, we also learn to extend our hip. Feel also the extension of your spine. Moving those ankles around. And then draw the right knee in and feel into the joints of your hips. Open up the knees wide. Can you feel, of course, you might feel your inner thigh muscles stretch a little bit, but can you give your awareness into the hip joints themselves and feel the rotation of that femur bone? And so play around. You don't have to just go in, out with the knees. Kind of do some circular motions with your knees. So you might do a full circle, kind of rolling right around, or a little half circles, but just see if you can notice where the slide glide of those joints are. And if you have one hip that's a little bit more free than another hip. All right, put your feet flat on the ground. Take your feet wide on the mat. Oh, actually right outside the edges of the mat. We're going to drop the right knee toward the inner left ankle. And then stretch your arms overhead if you want. Feel the length through the front of the hip and then come back up. And if this bothers your knee to internally rotate so much, then you just go as far as you can go. Switch sides, left knee toward right foot. Your right foot is flat on the ground with that right knee still in the air. Breathe here, open up the side body and back. And let's just sway back and forth between those two sides. So it's windshield wipering, but just a little slight difference in how we're doing it. Kind of a waking up the outer rim of the pelvis, kind of feeling into the hip joint from a different perspective. All right, and then we're going to deepen that a little bit. So put your feet a little bit closer in so you're still wider than your hips, but not off the mat. And we're going to drop our knees over to the left, have a block and stick it underneath your left hip or left leg, and lift up your left foot and put it to the outside of the right knee. So once again, feeling into the rim of the pelvis, some of the muscles that attach to the top of the pelvis. I can feel this in my transverse abdominis, even in my low back, and certainly in my outer hip. Where are you feeling it? What kind of capacity do you have to breathe into this hip stretch? And then lift the knees up, neutral. Do a little bit of a cat-cow, so anterior, posterior tilt the pelvis, and then we're going to go to the other side. So knees go right, pick up the right foot and put it to the outside of the left knee, use a block underneath your right leg or your left knee, wherever it wants to go, to support this. If, of course, if you're very flexible and you don't need the block, then you don't need the block. Okay, so open up, see if you can feel, is this side different? For me, it feels very different. I have a way different sensation in my left hip than my right hip. So I'm wondering if you do as well. Most of us are not very symmetrical in our movement patterns. We have a lot of history of I like this way, not that way. So just notice how this shapes up into the sensation of stretch in your hip. Okay, let's go ahead and bring those legs back in, knees back to the chest, around the spine. Any tension you felt in your back from that, just let it go. And take a deep breath and stretch your limbs. Arms and legs wide on the floor, open your body up. Exhale, knees into the chest, chin up. Let's do that one more time. Expand, open, stretch your body out, navel to edges. Exhale, draw it in. And then let's roll over onto your side and come up onto your hands and your knees. All right, so as you find your way on all fours, let's start to move the spine, arching and rounding the spine. Take care to notice your body. How is it moving today? What's free? What's not so free? Can you be kind to yourself? Can you speak kindly to yourself, about yourself, inside your own head? All right, and then let's go ahead and roll around. So move your shoulders, move your hips. Try to find that your spine doesn't do just one type of movement. It does multiple movements all at the same time. Remember your neck. And then a big anterior tilt to the pelvis. Take your knees maybe just a little wider apart than hip width. You decide. So you can go as wide or as narrow in child's pose as your body wants to go. But feel the deep flexion in the hips as you anterior tilt the pelvis. Sit bones wide. Stretch your arms forward. Relax your head toward the ground, on the ground, wherever you are. Breathe into the back of the body. Feel deep compression in the hip joints. Walk the hands over to the left and open the right side body. Breathe there. Can you still be dropping weight into the pelvis? Come back. Walk the hands over to the other side. Breathing deeply here. Relax your neck. Take time to find the way your lungs feel in this pose. And then come back to center and come all the way up onto all fours again. Okay, we're going to take our right foot straight back behind you. Curl your toe under. Weight bear evenly through your hands. Cross that foot, right foot over to left, and turn and look out over your right foot on the left side of your mat. Square hips and shoulders toward the floor. Breathe into the low back space. Exhale, come back to neutral. Knee down. Left foot stretches back, curl toes under, cross left foot over to right, turn and look out over the right, stretching through the side of your body. Breathe deeply here. And then come back to center. All right, settle back towards child's pose again. And then inhale onto your shins, arms up to the sky. Open the breath. Exhale, drop back down into some hip flexion. Child's pose, arms at your sides. One more time. Rise up, reaching the arms upward. Exhale, drop into the hip joints. Come up into dog pose when you're ready. Stretch your hands. Curl the toes under and lengthen through your full body. So feel the yielding and the rebound through your bones. Lengthen up to the pelvis from your hands. Lengthen up to the pelvis from your feet. Can you feel your melting, grounding hands and feet? Where are the pressure points in your hands? Can you balance things out? Soften the knees, bend them as much as you need to. Feel the heads of the femur bones drop way back in the joints. Set them back. Lift and widen the sit bones. Let the hamstring stretch come from the sit bones lifting instead of the knees pushing back. How's your breath? And then walk your feet forward. Come into Uttanasana, fold in half. Once again, as always, the knees can bend as much as you want them to be. Find your breathing. Inhale for a halfway lift. The spine grows longer. Legs can come a little straighter. Exhale and melt back down. Push off your feet. Rise up. Coming up to stand. Reach your arms to the sky. Find a deep breath. Spread open your wings. Open the chest. Hug the shoulder blades toward each other and then round in. Tuck your chin. Stretch your arms straight out. Press your palms away. And then, see what that feels like. Lift one ear, lift the other ear. Trying to get y'all to have some a little more ease in all the ways we use our hands. And then release your shoulders down. Take your feet wider on the mat than hip width and just spin. Let your shoulders, your ribs, your spine loosen a little bit by just some range of motion. Maybe you want to have your arms kind of cross over, one hand to the shoulders, you stretch your chest. Maybe you want your arms lower down. How is your breath? Let your other heel leave the floor as you twist away. All right, find your breath. Find Tadasana. Deep breath in. Heel down. Are you balanced? Okay, take a breath, reaching the arms up to the sky. Exhale and float forward. Bend your knees, relax your head. Inhale for a halfway lift. The spine is growing spaciously. Exhale and melt back down. Step your right foot forward, left foot back, come to a lunge. Extending the spine here. Feel the axial extension before anything else. And then stretch open the hip flexor of that back leg. See if you can get the feeling that your femur bone is lifting, your sit bones are widening, your spine is lengthening. Deep breaths. Okay, and then we're going to rise up, coming to Crescent Lunge. Decide where you want your arms to be. Your hands can stay down on your hips. Your arms can come up in the air or anywhere in between. Notice what's happening in the hip flexors of the back leg. Are you pushing that the femur bone forward? See if you can pull the femur bone back a little bit, even if you need to bend your knee a smidge to do that. Open up the heart. Breathe deeply into your posture. Start to warm up the muscles of your legs. All right, and then release the hands down onto the ground. Straighten your front leg a little bit. Tuck your chin toward your chest. Pick up your toes on that front foot. And then back into a lunge. You go, walk your back foot forward. Fold. Notice the difference between your two hips. Having done one thing on one side and not on the other side. Halfway lift, extend spine. Exhale and melt again. Left foot forward, right foot back. See what it feels like on this side. Is your lunge a happy lunge on this side? Do you have dominance in your balance, in your strength, in your awareness, in your range of motion? How are you different left and right? Ground your foot, your front foot, press it into the ground a little bit. Extend through your spine. Feel the hip flexors lengthen on that back leg. Can you feel the femur bone lift up? Can you widen the sit bones and stay rooted in your front foot? Rise up, Crescent Lunge, any position with your arms. So if you're dealing with a shoulder issue, maybe your right hands stay on your hips and you don't lift your arms up in the air. Maybe you platter your arms open. Maybe you have your hands out. So choose a wise pathway for your body. Breathe, whatever you're doing, you're breathing deeply. The shoulders rest down away from the ears. Notice if you kind of lean into the back hip. See if you can lift the femur bone back in the joint, soften the knee a little bit. Stay grounded in the front foot. And then release your hands down onto the ground, back to dog pose. Find your breath. Full reach as you lengthen. Come forward into a plank. Hold yourself steady. So notice if your hips drop, see if you can keep your pelvis in a straight line with your crown and tail. All right, and then as you are ready, let's go ahead and find our way down to the floor. You can bend your knees and slowly lower yourself down. Cobra Pose, press into the floor, lengthen through your spine, exhale, and melt back down. Deep breath, Stabilize the core of your body, your legs, your glutes, your core muscles. Exhale and melt back down again. Scooch to the right side of your mat and go ahead and lift your left knee up high. So we're kind of bringing it up toward the armpit and feel the flexion in your hip. And stay low, so don't go high. You can put your whole torso on the floor. You can bring your forearms onto the floor. Let's see if you can weight through that hip joint. Deep breath in, deep breath out. And then release that leg and change sides. Scooch over to the left side of your mat so that when you bring your right knee up, you have some space. You can be torso on the floor and you can be up just a little bit. What's giving you a sense of being able to imagine, weight yourself with a sandbag in that right hip joint. Drop it down. How are you supporting your lumbar spine and sacrum in this posture? Can you use your core? Can you widen your sit bones still? Okay, and then release and relax that down. Come back up onto your hands and your knees and free your back up. Sometimes that posture is a little much for some people's spine. So move your spine around, sway from side to side, do some circles, do a cat-cow, whatever feels nice for your body. And once again, coming back into child's pose with a big, strong anterior tilt to the pelvis, neutralize the spine. Go ahead and come up onto all fours. Bring your left leg straight back behind you in the air. We're going to keep our hands down. We're not coming into bird dog. And we're going to bring our knee in and then bring our knee out. So just find in that sense as you exhale, draw your knee toward your chest, inhale, and lengthen that leg out. So you might find that when you do this, you're rounding your spine a whole lot. So if especially you're protecting the axial extension of your spine, keep your crown lengthening forward as you do this instead of rounding your thoracic spine. All right, then let's go ahead and rest that knee down onto the ground. Establish your hands again. Maybe you need to roll out your wrists. Maybe your hands aren't comfortable and you need to put your forearms on blocks. So feel what you need to do. Straighten that right leg out in the air behind you. Extend through your spine. If your knee doesn't feel happy on the ground, maybe a blanket would help. And always, so start to move. Knee into chest. Always there's ways to modify. So if you can't be on your knee, you can do this posture with your hands holding on to a chair or a piece of furniture. And notice I'm not lifting my leg in line with my hip because my spine is not there. So I'm only, when I'm standing, lifting it back so I'm in a straight line. So you find you, okay? You do you. Support yourself in whatever way you need. And then when you're ready, we're gonna release. Again, stretch back to child's pose. We have one more round of things to do here on all fours. Once again, you can do this standing with your hands on a piece of furniture if need be, instead of on your knees. Bring your hands back down onto the ground. Stretch your left leg straight back behind you. And we're going to bring the knee out to the side, up toward the armpit and underneath you, and stretch it back. So if you've ever done breaststroke in the pool, this is kind of like a reverse breaststroke. Okay. So bringing the leg out, knee up toward the armpit, in and back. Just feeling into the beautiful range of motion that your hip joint has. Stabilize through your core. You're working with the hip on that standing leg. And now switch directions. A more classic one-legged breaststroke. So the knee's going to come up toward the chest, out to the side, and leg swings around to straighten. All right, and then relax. Sit back onto your heels, shake out your wrists, maybe child's pose instead. So if you're, have trouble being on your hands, you can always try taking fists on the floor or forearms on blocks, or stand up and put your hands on a piece of furniture. Change sides. So let's reverse our breaststroke, bringing the knee up, out to the side, up toward the armpit, into the midline, and stretch it back. Notice when you're doing this, if you're just leaning into your left side. See if you can still have that yielding, moving into the earth and pressing away. There's a lot of stabilizing forces that need to happen with your opposite hip, with that left hip. Now switch directions. Classic breaststroke, knee up, out, and around. How is your breath? All right, one more time, and then we're gonna find our way up to dog pose. Extend through the spine, breathe here, and then walk your feet forward and come into Uttanasana. You can grab onto your elbows if you want, release your wrists, shake them out, relax your neck. Inhale and rise up, coming up to the sky, arms lifting, exhale, and release your hands down. Let's stand on our right foot, just practice a little bit of balance. Lift that knee up, and remember, you can always hold onto something, finding the breath. Okay. And then we're just gonna open the hip out to the side. And there's so many ways you can do this posture. I'll use my couch because that's what I have available. You can even put your foot on something to do this posture, to feel into the rotation of your hip. It doesn't have to be in space. Sometimes having your foot on something can be very grounding, so you can really feel into the work of the hip. Bring your knee back into center and place that foot down onto the ground. Take a breath, enjoy your feet on the floor. Let's stand on the other leg, left leg, lift right knee up. Finding that sense of balance. Arms can go anywhere you want them to be. And then you can open that leg up. And same, if you have a chair, you can do this posture in the air. You can also put your foot on a chair so that you're finding the sense of openness without the need for balance. Okay, so there's lots of work that can be done without the balance being a part of the equation. It's actually really nice to do it that way. Bring yourself back, come 2 feet onto the ground, enjoy, ground yourself. All right, and then we're gonna just turn sideways, long edge of the mat. All right, so turn your feet out just a little bit, and we're gonna come down and up, just gently trying to feel into the range of motion in your hip joints. So, we're kind of peeking at goddess pose, but you don't have to stay. And your hands can be on your legs if you want, or they can be out wherever you feel comfortable. As you start to warm your femur bones in the hip joints and feeling them get a little comfortable in this rotation, find your feet, ground the 4 corners of each foot. Are you pressing evenly in your legs? All right. And now the next time we're gonna go, we're gonna stay. So remember, your goddess pose can be way up here, where the knees just have a little bit of bend in them. See if you can spin your feet. So as you press the 4 corners of your feet down, toes turn out, heels turn in, nothing's moving. It's an isometric contraction, and let that wake up those external rotating muscles, your piriformis being one of them, but there's 5 others that can help you along the way. And you can go as deep into this pose as you want to. If you lean into one side, if you have a knee that's a little trouble or a hip that's a little trouble and you tend to lean into your dominant side, back away in the posture until you're balanced. Anything that you want with your arms. Spin your jar lids. Breathing. All right, and then stand up straight and tall. Turn your feet in for a moment, pointing straight forward, maybe even internally rotate it a little bit, and come down to rest. Bring your hands down onto blocks or the floor. Release your head toward the ground. Okay, from here, we're gonna slide over to the right side. Bend your knee and open up the inner thigh of that other leg. It's so easy when we're here to hyperextend the straight leg, so have a little micro bend in it. Don't worry about how far you go. Just go into the depth of your knee and hip flexion as you can. Keep the spine long. And then let's roll over to the other side. Coming into stretching the inner thigh, lengthening through the spine. Deep breath. Okay. And then come back up, standing to neutral. When we come into Skandasana, kind of flowing from one side to the other, remember, you can be high up here for this pose. And your arms can be doing anything you want your arms to be doing. You can go much deeper and stay low. I don't care how deep you go, whatever you're doing, try not to round the spine. So we don't want to tuck the pelvis and round the spine to do this. We want to keep the axial extension of our spine. And see, as you're moving, if you can float from one, see if you can make the transition of weight from one foot to the other, be all about yielding, where we're not plopping up and going down and plopping up and going down. We want this sense of being able to transition our weight fluidly. Okay? Let your arms teach your legs something about fluidity. How is your breath? Anything you want to do, you can get really low if you want. Just see if you can keep the spine really spacious. All right, and then come up to a starfish, open your body. And then release the hands. We're going to turn our foot and come into Veer 2, Warrior 2. So hopefully your hips feel nice and warmed up for this, but always, always there's support to be had. If you have a knee that's a little wobbly or unstable, remember you can always put your shin against a block, against a wall or a piece of furniture. That's a great way to stabilize your knee so that you can get into the deep work of the hips. If you avoid standing poses because your knee hurts, support your knee so you can do the work in the hips. So there's a lot of strength work. It's really good for us to do these standing poses. Find your breath. So notice what's happening in the back hip. Does it push forward? Let your whole pelvis turn just a little bit so that, you're turning, not, all the way to your foot, but just a little bit of ease, and then take the thigh bone back. Ground through your front foot. Track your knee in line with your middle toes. Feel all four corners of that foot. Spin your jar lid here so the toes turn right, the heel turns left, nothing's moving. It's just an isometric to light up the backside of your pelvis, feeling all those rotating muscles engage. When we're doing such strong work with the hips, go ahead and straighten your leg. It's nice sometimes to go back and forth from one side to the other. If you continually do a few poses in a row that require these deep rotating muscles to engage, they can fatigue and then other stuff starts to take over. So sometimes it's nice to just start with a little bit of freshness, where you go from one side and then kind of ping pong back and forth. Root your feet as you come into Pradrasana. Where do you want your arms? If your pelvis is turning, let your chest turn too. So if you have a fair turn in the pelvis, try not to turn your torso back to the straight, long edge of the mat. Be in a neutral place in the spine. Extend the spine. Drop into the feet. Spin the left foot, jar lids. Toes left, heel right. Track knee in line with middle toes. Track knee in line with your sit bone. Try not to let your butt stick out on that left side. See if you can keep it in line. The femur bone of the back leg spins internally, the pelvis turns a smidge, and then take the thigh bone back without hyperextending the knee. Root into both feet. Can you feel what we did in Skandasana, where we rooted from one to the other? Can you even feel that yielding here? All right, let's go ahead and straighten the leg. Turn your feet to the first side, again to the right, Parsvottanasana. Perhaps you want to use a block for this pose today. Maybe you want to keep your elbow on your knee. So decide where you're going to be. Arm can come up overhead, out to the side, down to your side. If you're an arm overhead person, think about swinging the arm in front of you to lift your arm up so that you have a little bit of space in that shoulder joint. And then find the legs. The legs are the same. We're tracking knee in line with your middle toe, in line with the sit bone, letting the pelvis turn a little bit, taking the thigh bone back, that back leg, root into both feet, soften the back knee. Find your breath. Axial extension. Feel your crown and your heel move away from each other. Can you press your feet into the floor to give your hamstrings, glutes some work? right, and then let's go ahead and rise up. Okay, let's turn your feet to the other side. If you're using a block, bring the block with you. Remember, if your knee is bothering you, you can take a block at your shin against a piece of furniture and support your knee. This really helps. Okay, so if you are having knee trouble, try this variation. Bring your elbow onto your knee or your hand on the block. Shoulders broaden, chest broadens, shoulders down away from the ears, finding your breathing body. Root evenly through your feet. Press the four corners. Spin your left toes to the left heel to the right, isometrically. Find the bearing down, so weight bearing. Press both feet into the earth. Can you find that transmission from left to right? Maybe soften the back knee and then push off the foot to give to your front leg. Push off your front to give to the back leg. Are you finding your pelvis where you need it to be? Is the back leg extending without hyperextending the extension of the knee? Can you feel the crown? Can you feel the tail? Can you feel it connect to the heel on the ground behind you, or the back leg? All right, let's go ahead and find our way out. One more time, coming neutral, turn toes forward and relax head down. Spin back to the front of your mat when you're ready for a dog pose. And when you come into dog pose, let your hips relax. Soften your knees a little bit. Perhaps even take your feet a little bit wider and turn your toes in, so you have some internal rotation of the femur joints. Okay. All right, and then walk your feet forward, bend your knees, and come on up. So shake out your legs if you feel, the standing poses can be, there's not much in our day that we rotate so much like that in our hip joints. So it's so good for us to do. It keeps us having a wide range of motion, but it can be a little fatiguing for the hips. So we're going to come into tree pose. Drop your right foot. Now, just like I demonstrated before with your foot on a chair, this can be your tree pose. Okay, so you don't have to have your foot on your leg, but you absolutely can. So your foot also can be way down here with your toes touching the floor. And there's some interesting deep hip work when you do it this way. So it might be something to try if you always come up in tree pose. Maybe try keeping your toes on the floor and just sense what that rotation feels like in your hip. Soften the standing knee. Lift the spine. Reach your arms up to the sky, whether you're doing the pose with your toes on the ground, your foot on a chair or a piece of furniture, or your leg up in the air. Your standing leg hip draws back, the knee is soft. Relax your shoulders. Okay, and then release and melt. Switch sides. Standing on your left foot, turning right toes out to side. Do you want to have your toes on the floor and work with the hip joint there? Soften the knee. It's easy to just stick the hip out. So let's see what we can do to keep the hip drawn in, the thigh bone moving back, regardless of where you end up being in your legs. Arms can come up to the sky. Arms can come out. Hands can be at your heart. Whatever you're doing, are you breathing? Okay, so it doesn't matter which variation you're up to. Is your drishti, your gaze in a good place? Can you draw that knee back? And if you wobble and fall, that's totally fine. See if you can detach yourself from the hardening of balance, okay? Wiggle out your hips, loosen things up. Okay, we have one more standing balance pose to do, and then we're gonna get on the floor. All right, so when we're standing, the piriformis does a different action than when we're in deep hip flexion. When we're in a neutral leg versus deep hip flexion, the piriformis switches its position. So this will be starting to stretch the piriformis instead of working the piriformis. So go ahead, you can hold on to something if you need to for this. We're gonna come into figure 4 pose, okay? And all the muscles you just worked should now start feeling like they're stretching. So extend the spine, and you can go as down with your torso as you want, but just make sure you're not rounding the spine to do it. Keep the shoulder blades down the back and the spinal extension happening. Draw your femur bones back and widen the sit bones. How is your breath? And then come out of the posture. So a way that you can support yourself as we come to the other side, you can always do this pose with your backside against a piece of furniture or a wall. Okay, that's one way to support yourself. You can also do it with your hand on a piece of furniture as you come into figure four. So there's ways to take a little bit of the support so your balance isn't, you're not all over the place. Widen the sit bones, extend through the spine, stretch through your foot. Keep the spinal extension. Try not to round your spine forward. Shoulder blades moving down the back. How's your breath? All right, and then let's come out of the pose. Last time through vinyasa. Whoa. Take a deep breath in, reach the arms up. Exhale, float forward. Inhale for a halfway lift. Melt back down, step back, dog pose. Breathe here, melt here. Come forward into a plank. Hold yourself steady. And then lower yourself down to the ground. Take a deep breath, open your chest. Cobra pose. Exhale and melt. Relax for a moment. Come up onto all fours. Feel yourself ease. Just going to do a simple stretch for the hip flexors before we move into pigeon pose. So take your right foot forward. Back knee stays down on the ground. And we're just opening up the hips. So if you can keep your hands low, you can put your hands on blocks. You can put your hands on your knee. So however high you want to be to open up the hip flexors of that back leg. If your knee bothers you, try a couple different variations. You can curl your toes under instead of laying your foot flat. Sometimes that's a subtle change on your knee. You can put a blanket underneath your knee. You can opt to just stand up and stretch your quads. Okay, and then relax and melt. Stretching your quads is a little bit different than stretching your hip flexors. Go ahead and do the other side. Only one of your quadricep muscles is a hip flexor. The others just are a knee extender. So doing a posture like this where we're lunging and our femur bone is back behind us, we're kind of extending the femur bone. This will stretch the hip flexors and not just the quadriceps. So you get into that one quad, which is a really good thing to do. Extend through the spine. Try not to fall. So as always, when we do a posture like this, we're integrating. We're hugging just a little bit of front heel and back knee to support, lengthen through your spine. Maybe your hands want to come up a little bit higher. Just find where you want to be. Once again, are you still finding the differences between your left and right sides? How is this for your body? Do you tend to have some one hip that's a little bit more open in extension than the other? All right, let's come out of that posture and we're going to come onto our back for a moment. Okay, so just rest. Bring your feet into a neutral place, hip width apart on the ground, knees are bent. Breathing in, breathing out. And just enjoy. There's so much that gets involved with the movements of your hips. And, we're just focusing on rotation today, but there's a lot more to it than that. But keeping in this theme, so remember the piriformis, when your leg is extended and you externally rotate your leg, the piriformis is going to engage. It's going to, the muscle's going to contract. But when you bring your knee past 90 degrees up toward your chest and you externally rotate your leg, the piriformis changes its position And now it's stretching the piriformis instead of flexing the piriformis or contracting the piriformis. So in order to get a good stretch in that piriformis muscle, we really need the hip joint to be flexed to 90 degrees or more. So let's try reverse pigeon pose. Open yourself up. Okay, bring your your left knee forward, right foot on top of left knee. And feel the spine grow. So our axial extension is intact. We're not rounding. Widen the sit bones. Okay, and then relax. Go ahead and change sides. So our left foot is on top of our right knee. We're drawing our hip joints past 90 degrees. This way we're ensuring that the piriformis muscle is stretching in this position instead of contracting. Lengthen the spine, widen the sit bones, feel evenness. So, are you hiking one hip up higher toward the shoulder? Can you seek balance? All right, and then we're going to release and come out of there. So I have a couple of choices for you. Pigeon pose. If your knees like pigeon pose, your hips like pigeon pose, we're going to do pigeon pose. If you don't like pigeon pose, we're going to cross right thigh over left thigh. This will, adduct your thighs a little bit, crossing them to the midline, which will, you'll feel piriformis stretch here too. So you can cross like this, or if you're inclined, go ahead and take whatever support you need for pigeon pose. And, you can go as high as 2 blankets or more, a bolster, whatever you need to be underneath your right hip. Okay. And we're taking the right leg forward, the left leg back. Internally rotate that back leg and make sure your leg is in a comfortable place. Extend the spine forward, and you can walk your hands forward too. Now, maybe you want to have a block underneath your forehead. Sometimes supporting the head can be really nice. If you can't go that low, having elbows on a block and putting your head in your hands is another way of supporting your forehead. So however you end up in this posture, wide sit bones, axial extension. No matter which pose you're doing, wide sit bones, axial extension. Relax your neck and shoulders. It's so easy to round our spine when we try to open our hips. So see if you can maintain that neutral place. Then we're going to switch to the second side. So perhaps your legs, you'll spin around and do pigeon pose on the other side. Maybe you want to move to dog pose. If you're on your back, just switch legs. Put the other leg on top. Okay, so remember with pigeon pose, your heel, you can support. I have blanket underneath my thigh, my back leg, thigh, and my front leg sit bone. And I have 2 blankets. I'm using 2 blankets today. You can have your heel close to your pubic bone. You can start pulling your heel a little out further. Find the rotation that works for your knee, for your hip, for your SI joint. Not yesterday's variation of you, but right now's variation of you. And let's find our way forward. The spine stays long, the sit bones widen. Relax your shoulders and breathe. Can you feel, if you're in pigeon pose, a sweep across your sacrum, that you're not contorting the SI joints, but you're really feeling the stretch right in the hip joint and the muscles around the hip joint? Okay, let's go ahead and find our way out of there. Okay, so we're going to come down onto our back again. either take a twist, do a happy baby pose, windshield wiper your knees, something that kind of just eases your pelvis and your hip joints. Let you start to relax for Shavasana. And because we did so much work in the hips, you might have a unique choice. You might choose something uniquely today for Shavasana. Maybe you want to put your calves up on a chair. Maybe you want a little extra support underneath your thighs or knees or calves so that you have comfort in your hip joints. Have them be kind of passive and relaxed. So Shavasana is this beautiful gift to us, so let's not lose sight of its gift. As you find yourself resting and coming to a rest on the floor as you finish up your postures, make sure you feel at ease. Make sure you feel supported. And once you have those things in place, what can you do to melt your hips? What can you do to melt your spine? Let your limbs feel so heavy. Is your head able to soften and relax? Can you feel your chest broaden as you breathe? Relax your hip flexors, soften your pelvis, broad and wide and free. Let's begin to deepen our breathing. Before you move, see if you can just enjoy this sense of melting one more time. The gift of Shavasana is this gift of surrender. Find your breath. And eventually come onto your side. Take your time to get there. So there's lots of things you can do along the way. Waking the body back up a bit, moving your limbs. And as you find a comfortable seat, taking your time to get there, be up on something so that you have that support. And just notice, even before you bring your hands together, as you're sitting, notice, are you able to, are your hips a little bit more free? Are you able to sit a little bit easier? And then as you're ready, place your palms together at your heart. Bow in. Offer your energy, your love, your care, your compassion. Send it forth to someone in need. Namaste. Thank you, everyone.